Hello and welcome to today's episode of Rich, Simple Human. I hope you're joining us live on LinkedIn. If not, you might be listening on the podcast as a replay. But wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay listening because I have got the incredible Kate Noakes with me today. Kate, welcome to the show. I am going to entice people to stay tuned because you and I are going to talk about burnout, spiritual crisis, human capital cost, and the moral compass we need with concerns around power and ethics in the world that we live in today. I hope we've given that enough pump and oomph to keep people engaged because you and I have already had quite a lot of conversations that have gone into some very, very interesting areas. So if you are a leader, an investor, a founder, or an entrepreneur, please stay tuned. And if you're managing people, listen in because we're going to talk to you about the things that really make the difference. And guess what? It's not just another leadership training course. So, Kate, you are Director of Uplift Consulting, a psychotherapist and a leadership coach. And you're on the show today because we're going to dive in to the mind-body connection and the leadership field with both feet. Kate, welcome to the show. It is great to have you.
Thank you so much. Some of those big topics are a real sort of hook for everyone, aren't they? Very, very
I really
impressive.
hope so. And we might now need 6 podcasts. And of course, I'd love to welcome you back because when we build rapport and human connection with each other, guess what? Life's so much more enjoyable. And you and I have already enjoyed a couple of conversations. We've got mutual friends. And I just want everybody out there to remember to be human. That means touching, feeling, and being close to other people, not sitting on your screen or just scrolling through your phone. But we do need other human beings in our lives. And I don't know about you, Kate, but as much as I love my family, I love connecting with people like you too.
We're absolutely wired for connection, aren't we?
Yes, totally. And we really see the data suffer. I'm tracking everyone with the biometric data device and Whoop. And of course, when we become isolated or we become alone, the data really, really suffers. Loneliness kills. So without going on any further, Kate, I'm going to ask you the first question because you've had a really interesting career. In fact, your career bridges organizational psychology, coaching, and therapeutic practice. What I want to ask you first is, what did you learn in the corporate world that convinced you performance can't be separated from the inner world in terms of leadership?
Thank you so much for that question. Well, I have a little phrase, art and smart, and I often reference that. And if you think about corporate world, that very much encapsulates all the smartness, all the technical skills, all the competencies, all those areas of proficiency. Absolutely, they are critical parts of success, sense of self, sense of worth, and all of the important things. But if we deny ourselves the heart, i.e. our inner model, our inner needs, our inner world, we seem to operate in some sort of sense of disconnection. And this disconnection presents itself through stress, through everything can feel more laboured, more effortful. It can just feel just more difficult. So when we sort of try and live it from this place of disconnection, I've noticed that that's a difficulty. And I talk about a little story. I think humans are beautifully individual, but behaviours are remarkably predictable. You can see those patterns play out time and time again. And one that I often see in the leadership environment is a leadership model is that they can take their sense of self, their inner sense of self, and how they feel okay from what they achieve in their place of work. And then what happens is results become under threat, don't they? I mean, there's so much we try and control and navigate, but they become under threat. And therefore, what happens for us is our ego starts to surface us. And our ego comes from, I'm not sure I feel enough, I feel okay. It's usually very subconscious. And when this ego goes into the world, it affects how we interact. It affects our emotional connection. It affects even our own energy levels. So because we go into this sort of defense mode in order to try and secure that sense of self and results. And then what happens is we create emotional distance, we create effort, we put burden on ourselves, and those results become even harder to find. So that pattern that keeps playing out is what drew me into this work, to say there must be a better, more fulfilling, more complete way to not only secure results, because they do matter, but do them in a way that sustains our human heart.
Absolutely. Kate, we are at the bleeding edge of this work at the moment with the way that you and I practice. And we are really now beginning to see that we have to do both the physical, the mental, and the emotional, and the spiritual and relational as well to be effective leaders. There's no point just thinking with our clever brains, what's the latest technique? What's the management style I should adopt? Because we can't fight our humanness. And I love what you said there. Connection, control. When we're trying to control ourselves or we're trying to control others, it erodes the connection we have with ourselves in a world and people outside of us, because it's not how we're meant to operate. So thank you for articulating that.
Yeah, and I like, often we use the word, we need to pay attention to language, and we often use the word control and confuse it with being organized, structured, having good shape, which is absolutely a very healthy territory. What we mean is the style of control. And when you overlay the style of control, where control is that one person takes power from someone else, and when you take power away from someone else, it's going to create a dynamic of disadvantage and distance and difficulty. But it comes from a place of great intent. People want to secure results, but they create it from a place that costs, don't they?
Of course, and I was just reading one of the latest parenting books. It's another interest of mine. And it was talking about the way that we're just controlling our kids. And what we need to do is actually be connecting and being honest and authentic about our own failings. And I think that's something else. Our ego is there to protect us. We're out there to control the world, to protect us. But when we actually reveal some of the mistakes we've made, that's where the true connection and growth comes. That's where we learn everything. But I think certainly in the world of social media, we're very busy covering it up and trying to be perfect in every possible way, which doesn't really help anybody.
Yes, I mean, when we're in this sort of this world, don't we? There's several strategies that we go after. One, we try to control the uncontrollable. We try to make the uncertain certain, and we try to outpace change. So we sort of try and be faster than it. And all those things are near impossibilities, and that you can feel the psychological effort of trying to achieve that anyway. And when we do those things, we tend to take ourselves this place of well-being and vulnerability, but emotional distance to people that matter deeply to us. It's so
I've
easy
also seen that. It's so complicated, isn't it? But I've also seen that psychological effort of control actually burn a lot of energy. So people say, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, but they're trying to control and micromanage without really knowing it. And like you say, often it can be masquerading as being very organized. Now, is this true organization that's flourishing, healthy, is boundaried and regulated? Or is it over organizing, over controlling, over planning because of this sense of insecurity? I recently said to a client, I believe that I know them very well. Before I say this, I do believe that your control needs is rooted in your insecurities. And they said, yes, you're absolutely right. So anybody out there who's now thinking, I'm very controlling and very organized, well, actually, I'm going to make the assumption or prediction that you're actually insecure. And I think the world can begin to see that the older you get.
If we attach our sense of self to outcomes, then we're vulnerable to this need to control. And often when I'm talking to people in the coaching room, we talk about, if you can attach yourself, yes, of course you want to drive good results. If you attach your sense of self, your personal identity to it, that leaves you at vulnerability when things become out of your control. However, if you attach your sense of self to the values by which you live your life, they stay within you. No one can take them from you. And you are so much more empowered when you do. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And in fact, I'd written a question for you that I will ask you, because I think it just condenses everything we've just said. Why is it that highly intelligent and extremely successful leaders are still suffering when the pressure mounts?
For me, the experience of stress, which is a response to pressure, is a biological emotional response. It's not a matter of IQ, is it? It's a quality of being human. And so therefore, to think intelligence is going to protect us from the experience of stress and pressure is a bit of a misnomer. However, I even think it actually might even predispose us. That I'm saying this from personal view rather than sort of a research paper that I've read. But it makes sense to me that if we're carrying high intelligence, we're going to see risks more vigilantly. We're going to overthink things. We're going to have higher expectations for ourselves, which predispose us more to stress and pressure and all the difficulties that may take us towards. But the delight is we can also have more strategies available to us to maybe cope within it. So there's kind of two sides to this. The intelligence that we have can predispose us to it, but equally they can be our resource to find alternative routes back. But yeah. We're human, aren't we? We're human.
We are. And I think we forget, actually. I was saying to somebody last night at a women's investor event, our biological responses are our biological responses, and they're coded into us. Dogs were domesticated 10,000 years ago. They still exhibit traits of wild dog at times and bite people. As humans, like you've just said, we are biologically responding to stress with that nervous system response, heart starts racing, breath quickens, we begin to feel the anxiety. Yours and my job is to show people how to recognize it and then override that biological response. And I think we're going to come on to that shortly. But we forget we're designed in this way, and we need to be aware of it.
Yeah, this machinery, our minds, our bodies, has not really changed significantly from eons ago when we were operating in a much simpler but much more threat-loaded world. Where there were saber-toothed tigers and things that would be there to put us into that threat state. We've now just got so much more data that takes us in not only to physical threat, but social threat. And I'd say, in the sort of social media, that social threat is far more prevalent because there's so much data that makes us feel under judgment, inadequate, not enough, all those very, very human experiences.
And when you say social threat, can I just check that you're referring to that conditioning that we're going to be thrown out of the tribe, excluded from the group, and left in the wilderness to die?
Yeah, it's threat of rejection, threat of not belonging, threat of job insecurity, threat of reputation being under review as well. So it has sort of more subtle manifestations in modern day life, but it is we're going to get kicked out of the tribe and we're wired to want to belong.
When you start thinking about it through the evolutionary lens, it all makes so much more sense. But of course, then we don't have the space in our world to react accordingly because it's just happening in nanoseconds. Our body's responding, our brain is firing, our mind is working. And I know that you and I are a big fan of having people create space to observe and choose their reactions rather than just choose their responses rather than just reacting.
And pay attention to this nervous system that is going on the whole time. And again, we've spoken, haven't we, about the aspects of the nervous system that is just there, and to know it is to be able to become more masterful of it.
Yes, I just remind everybody, you can't manage what you don't measure. So measure it and then manage it. That is where we're also going to talk a little bit about heart math.
There's some wonderful resources out there that can really help those that need the data to feel it's real rather than the concept.
I mean, I think we should. People argue with me actually a lot about this. Why do I need to see the data? Well, because otherwise it's a bit subjective. And we do tell fibs. So we might say, oh, yes, I went to bed at 10 o'clock and I had a great night's sleep and I wasn't on my phone. And I say, that's funny because your data said you were still awake at 1 o'clock in the morning and your HRV is so low, I would imagine you had the blue light of your phone shining in your eyes until well gone 11 o'clock.
And there's a little example I often use in the classroom where we talk about if I was to, by stealth, go to the driveway of someone and put a brown sheet of paper across the dashboard of your car, i.e. remove the metrics and measurements of how to drive a car, would you drive it differently? And some people say, no, I'm a very competent driver, but then they go on and say, well, I probably might refuel a bit more often. I might be a little bit slower. I might put my radio down so I can listen to the mechanics of the car. Measurements do affect how we behave, even in that very sort of simple, fun example. So measurements are our friends if we allow them to be honest.
I love that example, Kate. And actually, I was driving tonight and the Waze was bringing up the speed limit, so I was watching the speed limit on projected on the windscreen, and I did think to myself, this is technology taking over again, because instead of me thinking when I passed my driving test in 1925, whatever it was, what should the speed limit be on a dual carriageway and I should be obeying it, instead not bothering to do any mental processing, not bothering to even use those neural pathways, I'm just waiting for the data on the screen. So when people say, well, I should be able to feel it, because of the amount of technology we're exposed to, we feel even less because we're on default autopilot all the time.
Yeah, we've lost the skill of tuning into it. Absolutely, because the technology is doing the job for us.
It's like we've lost the skill to wait for Christmas presents because now we can just Amazon everything next day. Do you remember making those lists for months on end? That one thing you really wanted, waiting for it, going to John Lewis or the Argos catalogue. Anybody listening who doesn't know what we're talking about, I don't know what the modern day Smiths toy catalogue, that was probably the latest. That just waiting for something because then that's how it worked. And there wasn't going to be new stock in the shop every week. You had the summer collection and then you had the winter collection. Remember Marks and Spencer's? There wasn't new stuff in the store. We waited. And of course now we don't. I'm digressing off into my shopping.
No, I'm joining you in that little walk down nostalgia lane. I love it. Absolutely love it.
I'm currently coming to the end of a no-spend January, as far as I could possibly do it, and I'm so proud of myself, I can't tell you. The amount of resistance I've been building in my resistance muscle, getting to the cash point, with a card, putting things in my internet basket. I've retrained myself all month.
Yeah. And the build on it, I'm really drawn to, like you said, in terms of paying attention to things that we've forgotten to tune into. Again, a lot of work to do just paying attention to our felt senses. This is one of sort of our therapeutic practice, what you can feel sensorily within your world, because that's kind of how our bodies first make sense of the world, through the senses, then it processes it through the brain. But if we start to pay attention to our sensorial world, there is so much information there, but we spend most of our time in denial of it. It's an inconvenience. We don't want to be there. So even to ask people to pause and say, where are you feeling these things? Tell me the temperature of it. Tell me the energy. Tell me the oscillation. Tell me where it's traveling. Can you make any sense of it? And you see people have huge, significant insights, just even from that sort of experience of scanning and learning about what the body's trying to tell us. There's so much information.
Yeah, it's amazing. And in fact, you've just reminded me, one of my favourite sophrology exercises is a simple breathing observation. But you really ask the client to think about, can you sense the temperature of the air coming into your nose and going out? Because it heats up in your body. Can you pay attention to that temperature difference of the sensation of breathing in and then breathing out? And of course, what happens is then they start asking me, well, which nostril should I be breathing in and out of? And should I have my mouth open or closed? And how should I be doing it? And I think one nostril feels a bit blocked. I'm a bit, but well, oh, can we get out of the
Yeah, the
thinking?
mechanical side of it.
And just come into this experience. So if you've got a moment now, just breathe in and out and notice, look, there's air coming in and out. And we always say you become more conscious by observing the subconscious processes that are going on in your body all the time.
And sometimes when I do these exercises, and that for a lot of corporate people and professional people that are so busy in their minds and their plans, they often, on first experience of it, say, I can't switch off, but that's learning. And my brain is the to-do list, and I've got to do this and got to do that, and I can't even be with what's going on in my body. That's okay. That's absolutely, because that's learning. That's insight to say that we've kind of tuned away from our whole experience of being a human, body, heart, and mind.
And then we can't feel anything. And then we're chasing dopamine, and then we're disconnected, and off we go.
Yeah, slippery slope.
It's a sad world, but we're here to make it better, Kate. I'm excited to be with you on the mission. Can I ask you, and again, this is a bit of a recap, what is the cost to people and industry of leading purely from cognition, the brain, without bodily or emotional awareness?
What's the cost to organisations of leading?
And individuals. If we just lead with this clever head.
Let me think about, kind of want to answer this in terms of what, if we pay attention simply to our cognitive space and we forget a number of domains, I think you listed a few of them, but I think one of the domains is our threat and protection domain. When that's activated, we go to stress. We go into very primitive survival protection mechanisms. And if we're not paying attention to that, the cost is health. We are really running, and our ability to learn. When the brain's in high stress, it kind of shrinks other parts of the activity of our brain. So we compromise learning, we compromise feeling and recall, we compromise even analysis and logic, because stress wants to take over and threat wants to take over. So in a way, when we don't pay attention to that part of our brain, we are denying we need to process the stress and the threat and the fear to be able to healthily use other parts of our brain. And I think when we deny ourselves emotion, I love to pay attention to the constructs of words. Motion sits in the word emotion. And I think when we engage emotional connection, belief, we actually predispose far more effectively people towards engagement, motion, action, activity. Does that sort of make sense in terms of sort of denying ourselves to sort of appeal to the whole brain? And emotion is such an active, because it feels, it engages, it connects, and it also predisposes us to want to take action. So to deny that would limit us. And if we simply say in the place of logic and analysis and our cognitive competency part of our brain, we have function, but we are operating and probably in a very sort of singular way. And I just feel we want to use the whole brain and the whole heart and the whole body to get performance into our arena.
Yeah, why wouldn't we use all the resources we've got? It's a bit like driving, with one eye shut, or trying to throw a ball with one hand tied behind your back.
Well, I say driving the car in one gear. You've got 5 or maybe more. Why wouldn't you use all of them? You're driving in one gear very, very mechanically.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we talked at the beginning of the call about human capital cost and this sort of burning people as fuel in businesses. If we can use all of our sensory awareness, our mind and our body, it really does take the pressure off, and it reduces burnout. It makes us more effective, increases profitability. But I still see businesses coming to me and saying they just want to work on the mindset. And I think, well, there's an awful lot more we could do here.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know how when you sort of mindset, what mindset? And it feels very, it feels loaded in judgment that there's only one mindset that will unlock a solution or performance. So for me, yeah, I'm sort of reacting a little bit to that word. It says we all need to think and cloned into thinking one particular way, and actually we're better for the varieties of mindsets that we bring to our work. So I've also got a little bit of a reaction to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. There's so much more to it. And I think when we value the uniqueness of leaders, especially in that forum, and they lead as unique leaders and encourage others, that's where that's where their skills, their sort of God-given gifts and talents are so important. Not just this cookie cutter. This is what all our leaders should be like. There's no
Yes.
diversity in that at all.
Yeah, and
Kate,
again, there's huge risk when you don't see things from multiple perspectives, because we lose sight of real effective risk analysis if we go back to some of the core disciplines of business life.
yeah, absolutely. And it's a bit like a diverse board. In order for a business to make a decision, it needs diverse leadership and a diverse board, or it's missing half of the information it could be using. And especially when we think from a financial perspective, we know that financial decisions are made from physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and relational experiences. They're not made on data. So the diversity is absolutely crucial. Can I ask you, Kate, about heart rate variability and heart math? Because I want to know what this reveals about leaders' resilience and how it's used in the marketplace.
So we talked a little bit earlier about the importance of measurements and metrics, because they allow us to see things for what they are and not convince ourselves of other realities. So I've always been fascinated about how we engage at the whole heart and all that we need to do to our work. And so I came across the work of Heart Math Institute, a not-for-profit organisation in America who's done extraordinarily good and enormous amount of work about understanding the messaging between heart and mind, and that we can secure higher performance if we can get greater coherence. And in order to, one of their core metrics that they track to do that is heart rate variability. What that is, because it sounds a bit sort of scientific and complicated, but what it basically is there is a gap of time between the beats of our heart. And if we have high variability, i.e. the time in between from one heartbeat to the next has flexibility and variety in its pattern, it's indicative of an adaptive nervous system that is kind of healthy and regulated and coping with stress, that also has high resilience. So we have good psychological resilience. When we have low heart rate variability, i.e. there's kind of very rigid gaps of time that sort of they say the same sort of time difference between heartbeats, it's indicative that we've gone into fight or flight, and that we are sort of less resilient, more rigid in our thinking, because we are sort of taken into that stress state. So we have a actual measure that a lot of now these health watches and health rings that people have are tracking, so we can see. And I actually have an app that I use on my phone that allows me to, and I have a monitor that kind of catches my sort of pulse, and it allows me to see visually how my heart rate variability is forming, because I can say I'm fine, and actually it's going bum bum bum. Usually with me, the technology's having a bit of a time, it goes straight sort of a more chaotic pattern, and I can see it visually, and therefore I can even work on interventions such as breathing techniques or thought processes, and I can watch in the moment myself get command back of my stress state. How amazing is that?
It's absolutely incredible. I think I can't work out why everybody's not doing this, because when you understand the mechanics that the system that you're living in, the body that you're living in, the nervous system that's governing both systems, mind and body, and then the fact that HRV is a window into what's actually happening, and that you can control and affect it with breathing techniques, visualization. That's just remarkable, isn't it? Because it changes everything.
Well, it's like the driving the car. We wouldn't drive without all those dials in front of us, and we're doing life with some dials available to us that maybe we're not using.
I ask you, in terms of the workplace, when leaders with dysregulated nervous systems show up, how are they shaping the culture?
Again, I think we know this, but again, the Heart Math Institute have done some really fascinating work where they've shown that our states, so how our nervous systems are set, emit electrical currents, and quite extraordinarily perceptible ones. So people can really experience them in there. So if we're in a state of stress, people absorb it, the energy transfers. If people are in a high energized state, so regenerative and filling and enthusiastic and excitement building, we can absorb them. So without even speaking a word, the effect of our own states are traveling. And again, I've even done, and I hope this doesn't sound too kooky, because I'm somebody who loves the science to make the case for it, but I've done some exercises in group settings where we've really paid attention to what's going on in our own energetic field and been invited to try and share it within the room. And sometimes it's quite extraordinary what it can achieve. People can actually feel the the pulsing effect of someone's energy state, and you can control whether that's uplifting, energy generating, or energy depleting.
I absolutely agree with you, and I'm on exactly the same page. But I think what has happened is we've turned off this radar. So it might suddenly happen that we notice somebody's particularly angry, or somebody looks at you in a certain way, or you subconsciously perceive that energy field. But it's almost like we've turned it off, Kate. So how do you get people to turn the awareness back on in those sorts of exercises?
I mean, this is a difficult ask, because it's asking for people to suspend certain and long-held models, and also to have a bit of belief in this. So I'm acknowledging all that reality for people, that it's we're asking people to take some experiences and faith. So I say for people, sometimes just have the experiment of it. Have the experiment of again, heart math technique. They call it heart locking, where you do some breathing work, and then you fill yourself with regenerative emotions and ask it to pass, and then just experience it and go, oh, I feel like I'm a little bit more settled, and with a bit more practice it becomes even more established, and see how it affects others. I think there's something about allow yourself privately to give it a try with a healthy level of cynicism, and see if it can make a difference. But I think from an organization and cultural point of view, you can't not have a culture. You will have a culture. It's whether it's the one you want to have, or one that you get by default. And I think it's being aware to when we, if we maybe look into a session and say, well, our culture feels quite confrontational and difficult, and and it's everyone else's fault. Well, maybe explore your part into it, and how you work with yourself from your state and the way that you are. Get a bit more curious about how that might affect others, because I think you might be surprised how much it is having.
And also the fact that we can change this energetic output just with intention. So if we're really thinking, I don't wish to be transmitting confrontational energy right now, I'd like to be transmitting curious energy, we can actually shift our state and really impact people around us. So those of you in the sales field who are listening, can I just remind you, work with Kate and I, and you will learn how to influence your clients without saying a word, just through your own energy field and perceptions. It does sound like we're right on the edge of woo, Kate, but of course,
Yes.
there's scientific evidence behind this.
Yes, I mean, again, the guys in sort of HeartMath have done where they put people in Faraday cages so that they kind of removed every electrical influence in our modern life, and done some imagery work and asked them to other people to receive what they're seeing from an image, and there's been impact, significant impact in terms of how people can read what's going on for somebody in their internal state. But at its simplest level, where if we're in sort of stress versus calmness, if we kind of stay in those domains, those kind of that spectrum, we know when someone's in high stress versus holding solid, reassuring calmness, don't we?
We do, and I've actually made myself quite unpopular by suggesting that if you have a founder or a leader who is in fight or flight with a very low HRV, are they really employable, and are they really investable? And of course, that's an incredibly controversial conversation. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because if we were exhibiting an inability to cope with stress, and we can see that data, that does make me wonder how effective we can really be in those spheres of influence.
And equally, the other thing I also want to say is it's not healthy to say that we want to eradicate stress. It is a important, necessary human experience. It's just being a little bit more for all our emotional states and what we bring to consciously to scenarios that we want to be more effective in.
No, we can't eliminate it. And actually, it made me laugh reading an article by Will Ahmed, who's the chief exec of Whoop. And he said, if you've got a red score, flourishing is not good, stay home. And what he actually means by that is not you're not capable of coming to work, but if you have hit that point where your stress levels are high, or you're not performing optimally for illness or sleep, take a day off, recover yourself and get back to it. Because what I see happen with clients is it slides. Once they start in that stress cycle, it continues for quite a while. It's quite difficult to get yourself out of it. Whereas if you hit the brakes, it's a bit like putting the car away at night in the garage, Kate. You wouldn't put the car in the garage and leave the engine on. You've got to turn the engine off, let it cool down. The car would it wouldn't last long at all if that's what you did. And humans are the same.
Yeah. It's a really good example. It's allowing the things to regulate and having a skill with it, and time. Sometimes things take time.
That's right. And having a toolkit, to know that you can't always be on. So how do you use the toolkits to turn off and then you turn back on again? A bit like the mobile phone. we don't turn them off anymore, well, actually, they don't last as long. Somebody out there is now debating that technology and will probably email me to say I'm wrong in saying that, but you get the point I make.
Absolutely.
Kate, can I ask you about power and authority versus influence? And I've been debating this quite a lot recently because I'm in the middle of quite a lot of strengths assessments with clients. Power and authority, I have the power, I am in charge, versus influence, I can influence you, are two different states. How can leaders learn to feel more influential?
Yeah, and I've got a sort of a mixed view of influence, because influence sometimes could have the connotations of influence to manipulate, and so it's another version of power and authority. It's the spirit that overlays the influence, or the spirit that overlays the power, that I think we really need to pay attention to. But when we're leading from power or authority, ecologically, often the view is it's a psychological defense to not feeling enough, not maybe feeling valuable, not feeling a sense of self-worth. And when that presents, we want to feel more worthy, but we do it through this method of sort of power, control, hierarchy over. And what happens is that from the body and mind point of view, it's energetically expensive. So we can maintain results, but we're burning down our psychological batteries to achieve it. So it's energy expensive. It can often, because it attaches to ego, it can be less agile. It doesn't want to adapt to new information and new scenarios, new situations. So it actually locks us into rigidity. And if someone is holding power, they're usually taking power, which again really affects the other parties. They're going to sort of comply. And I sort of, if we're leading from influence, but it's influence that's infused with purposes and things that we serve, and it's infused with the idea of connection and respect and courageous direction. And so we kind of charge it up with these moral compass values that we want to choose to have. What you're finding is you secure the results, because we need results. We're all in the business of we need those results, but we seem to secure it in a way that is less energy expensive. Actually, it's more energy efficient. We're using a lot of car analogies. I liken it to the hybrid car, because the battery keeps charging as we drive and put the brakes on. So it's a far more efficient way of operating a car. And when we need to be adaptive, it's far more agile, and it's the empowerment gets everyone on board, so not one person is burning out. So if we can operate from that place of connection and purpose-led way and respect and courageous direction infused with a whole heap of humility, that's when our skills of influence feel different for the people that are receiving them.
That's a great explanation, Kate. Thank you. It's such an interesting field of discussion, and I could ask you millions more questions, but we would then be here all night, and that won't keep anybody listening. Kate, can I also ask you then about self-awareness? Because you've just alluded to that. And the question I wanted to ask is, why is self-awareness versus sort of self-improvement or self-development still the most avoided leadership discipline?
I think I heard somebody, as I love my podcast, I heard someone speak about it and say, identity is one of our most precious things. Our sense of who we are, the identity we hold, and how we describe and feel about ourselves is such a treasured thing that when we ask ourselves to become more self-aware, sometimes even through inviting others to give us feedback, etc., we are putting something so precious into a very vulnerable place, because we are asking people to take this down, some cup in my hand, take these views of who we are and give it, people might deem it judgment, but give it a view of, and we find that so incredibly hard.
It's a great answer, Kate. Absolutely fantastic. And I think you're absolutely on the money there, Kate, in terms of that process of self-awareness makes us feel so vulnerable because our identity is so important to us.
Yeah. It's often so private as well. We keep it as a very private thing that we don't. So we often communicate and view each other in the sort of domain of personality. Personality comes from the Latin word persona, which means mask. So we operate in this, navigate. This is my mask. This is who I am, and I'm quite happy for you to critique that, because I know deep down that's not me. So and that's the same private. When we operate in the sort of the self-awareness where we are really critically reviewing our sense of self, that is so exposed and so vulnerable. So we avoid it at all costs. And yet it's the gateway. This vulnerability is the gateway to the deepest transformations and growth journeys anyone can have.
I'd love to see that on the podcast headline, Kate, actually. Vulnerability is the gateway to development. You know, you and I both use 360 with clients. The sense of vulnerability in that is so high. And I know you hold that space very, very carefully for people. It is so transformational because it does exactly what you've just said. It challenges and refines that sense of self, deepens that self-awareness almost to becoming a superpower.
Oh, it's extraordinary when it happens. I often, when I sort of go into a coaching or training environment, and you see the cross arms and you see the signaling of sort of defence, don't go there. I often know for those people the transformation's the biggest. I actually kind of, the part of me going, oh, it's going to be extraordinary if we can build the safety and the permission for someone to go where they could go. And I think there's another little phrase I like: you can't heal what you can't feel. So if they're able to do the sort of deep emotional connective work then and feel it, that's often when the healing happens. And when the healing happens, then you have the freedom to live away from these things that we're maybe all deeply and darkly holding for ourselves.
You can't heal what you can't feel. So feel it to heal it. Makes me feel uncomfortable inside when I say it.
Yeah, I know.
Healing is not a one-time activity, Kate, as you and I know. It's a continuous process. And for those in sort of 12-step type programs or doing lots of self-development, it's a daily work, one day at a time. I will remind all of you out there, if you haven't done that today, get it done. Kate, the final question I've got for
Thank you.
is around spiritual crisis, because it's something that you've talked a lot about. I know it's part of the Heart Styles work and it's in the public domain as a conversation. Can you tell us what you mean by that and what the crisis really is?
Yeah, the spirit is another domain of who we are, and it's very much connected to our model for this word and where we draw our meaning and purpose from. So again, it has such a central influence. For some, that might be faith. For others, it may be causes that matter to them. It doesn't need to be around faith. It can be so many things. So I kind of want to broaden the description of spirituality as something that is energy generating for all of us if we can connect to it. It allows us to find courage where we're predisposed to fear, because we are drawing our desire to take action from things that are beyond ourselves, and we don't need the validation of others to connect to. We validate ourselves when we serve those causes and purposes that are deeply found within us. So I just want to sort of give a description of the impact and importance of spirituality in our world of work and life. The thing is, we are not being very well exposed or trained to it. This world of digital, we use the example that the digital world is doing so much work for us. We're not sort of flexing our spiritual muscles to work out what it is, because we're letting the digital world tell us what to believe in and how to think. For generations coming through, there's little practice in this arena, or it can, there's risk of denial. And I think we're also seeing in the wider geopolitical environment so much bravado and test around it. It's kind of taken to a place of questioning disconnection, and we don't quite know what to do with it. So that crisis is meaning we're feeling quite rudderless rather than anchored.
That's a great description of what's happening, Kate. And again, it's a podcast in itself, that conversation. But it's part of the work that you do. It's part of the work that I do. And if anybody out there is thinking, well, actually, I don't have a spiritual dimension to me, or that part of you has gone to sleep, now is the time to wake up. And however you do that, we've got lots of ideas, but it is very, very important to frame this moral compass and to counter some of the conversations we're having around power.
Yeah, and lots of people haven't asked themselves this question. So people who are feeling that on this, who are listening into this, they are not alone. And a question I often ask is, you'll have a sense of where your spirit is not being met when you feel dissatisfaction in either work or life, because it's given you a clue by it not being met, and you're feeling agitated and feeling, oh, this isn't for me, or this doesn't feel right, because something is poking it. So if you can't find what it is, what's your why, what's your purpose, what gives you courage and what anchors you to a world where you don't need validation by others. Think about when you felt that sense of not quite being okay, because it often lies in those experiences too.
That's beautifully put. Kate, that brings us to the end of our conversation today. I wanted to say thank you very much for being on the show. If anybody would like to get hold of you, Kate, I know they can find you on LinkedIn and on your website. Would you like to just tell the audience what the website is and what name you're under on LinkedIn?
Well, thank you so much for that one. So my name's Kate Noakes. So if you search there, you'll see me with my signature red hair. So that I will be that Kate when you look at us on LinkedIn. And I'm part of the Uplift Consulting family, a group of like-minded, brilliant practitioners that really specialise in this space. And their website is www.uplift-consulting.co.uk. So look us up there and make connection, and we would love to have these chats with you, because there's so much more, as you said, to share. We've just given you
Thank you
a
so much.
flavour.
And please remember to share. Yes, we've only scratched the surface of all these conversations, but please also follow along for the newsletter. Go to lindseyfrancis.co.uk to download that newsletter. Every week there's a show, every week there's a newsletter. We're posting on LinkedIn, and it really is my personal mission to bring some of these conversations into the spotlight so we can really live as rich, simple humans. Until next time, go easy.